What's going on, everybody? Paul Hickey here with NoOffseason.com. And I am super excited today because I've got my main man, Andy Cason, back on the Football Card Strategy Show with me today. He is the publisher, owner, genius, strategist behind Football Card Quest. You got to go check that out. Football Card Quest on YouTube and patreon.com/footballcards, I think, is where you're going to want to go get his, Andy can correct me if I'm wrong, but he's Football Card Quest everywhere on social media, but he's got the premium subscribers as well. And let me tell you something, everybody, nobody knows football cards like this man right here. So I'm super happy to have him on the show. Andy Cason, how you doing today?
Hey man, I'm doing really good, Paul. I'm happy to be back. And yeah, 100% football cards all day, every day. And this is a great time of year to start the off-season grind as we're getting ready to enter free agency and draft. And man, I tell you what, there's a lot of activity in the market right now.
Yeah, so I'm excited to talk football cards as well because I think this gets to be the time, February 24th, we're a couple weeks past the Super Bowl. There's a lot going on in the news cycle for football. And one thing I wanted to ask you straight away today is if I recall correctly last year, now I learn sort of seasonality of cards every year. And I think to a certain extent of maybe like 5 to 10% of things change each year, but we're still sort of new. I think we're in probably the third, maybe fourth year of like understanding what this card, and maybe even second year of understanding what the seasonality behind the football card hype cycle actually is. And if I recall correctly, you and Carter on your show, the Football Card Quest pod, you guys talk about typically the hype cycle not really dying down for football cards. Is it till June? Like, is it June when the hype cycle kind of finally dies down? Like, are we still in February 24th, even though we're past the Super Bowl now? Are we still in a hype cycle right now?
Absolutely, 100%. And it's a combination of things, but just from like a macroeconomic perspective, a lot of people are getting those federal tax returns, like year-end bonuses. They're coming off of the holidays, and the Super Bowl's just finished, and it's like people are still hungry for that football activity, and you can no longer like bet on football games or play fantasy football in a lot of formats. So the next best thing is like, let's beef up your collection. Like, who did good this past year that there's a lot of rumors around, or that may be changing teams, or that may be setting up for a big 2023. And a lot of people are making moves right now, which a lot of people think that, it's kind of counterintuitive because like, oh, season's over, it's time to buy, jump in. Well, that's what everybody's thinking. So when you have all these people jumping in, plus, some extra cash in their pocket, you have a lot of sales volume going down right now. And prices are either staying steady or going up a little bit for some players. There's some reaches here and there, but there's not many guys that are really going down.
Yeah, like anecdotally, my example there is I put a bid on a Ramondre Stevenson Contenders Optic rookie ticket auto the other day, and I was like immediately outbid. Like it wasn't an auto bid. It was like I had the highest bid for a second, and then a few minutes later, somebody came in and manually outbid me, and it was a high bid, and I'm like, I'm not paying that much for him. Like I can put that money elsewhere. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel it too, and I love it because we all want the market to be strong. And so a second ago, you mentioned players moving teams. So let's jump into, there's a bunch of different directions to go in today, but I'm going to kind of go in order here because NFL free agency allows card flippers and card investors to make plays if they're smart, if they're astute, and things have to fall a certain way in free agency for things to work out. And what I mean by that is if you're going to buy a quarterback that you think might be switching teams, I think it has to happen, right? Like the team, like if somebody gets the franchise tag or whatever, it's probably not going to cause a hype spike. But if somebody switches teams, it probably is. So if you're going to target like Geno or Lamar or, We know Derek Carr is switching teams. We can talk about that. There's rumors surrounding Aaron Rodgers after his darkness retreat, which I will not. I'll try to reserve my commentary around my personal views on Aaron Rodgers. But let's talk about plays that you think make sense or could make sense during NFL free agency. And they don't have to be quarterback related. We all know you go way deeper than the quarterbacks, which is why you have so much valuable information to share.
Yeah, it's like building out a fantasy roster in a super flex league where you're drafting quarterback, you're prioritizing quarterback with like your most valuable picks, or in the sports card world, your most valuable dollars. But then you're also diversifying because you've seen the spikes in wide receivers, running backs, the best tight ends, even some defensive players as well. So, it does go, way beyond just the quarterbacks. And yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's going to be some big changes. Like Derek Carr is definitely going to find a team. He's making the tour right now, according to his brother. He stopped with the Saints. The interesting thing is he's had this head start over the entire free agency pool. So he's like been to the Jets and the Saints and probably talked to the Panthers, but he's going to land somewhere. Maybe he's talked to the Colts too. So he's definitely going to land somewhere. I've seen some, like his cards have like gone up 5-10% in some situations, but based on the news, based on where he lands, they could spike as much as like 30-40% and never really get back to that point if he doesn't really go out and exceed the new expectations for him on the new team and take them to a deep playoff run, So I love selling on the news. I think that it's a critical piece of the football card sales cycle, like just like with Christian McCaffrey when he was traded to the 49ers. Even though they made a deep playoff run, he played incredible. His best rookie card prices were when he was actually the initial trade happened to the 49ers. And that's what we see time and time again.
Yeah, I love that you just said that, because Kendall said the same thing about baseball cards on the Sports Card Strategy show this week. He said like he had a Jeremy Pena and Julio Rodriguez, and they're two of the top prospects that spiked upon their initial debut. But then Julio Rodriguez won Rookie of the Year and Jeremy Pena won the World Series. And he said the prices stayed, the prices dipped, but then ultimately the peak was at the original debut, and so the original hype, not the performance hype. And so we see the same sort of pattern in all sports, unless there's a championship and unless that player is like the MVP or playing super well. Like, even like, I don't want to digress too much, but even Travis Kelce, like I haven't looked at the data, but I wonder if how much his cards actually spiked after the Super Bowl win versus maybe even just the beginning of the football season. So I think that I don't know. We'd have to look into that. But I hear what you're saying with the selling Derek Carr right now versus sort of I think it's a huge risk to hold Derek Carr, because if you were to hold him past, or if you were to buy into Derek Carr thinking that whatever new team he ends up on is going to win the Super Bowl, I mean, the odds of that are just extremely low.
Yeah, extremely low. And you could look at Travis Kelce, Mahomes, Mahomes Prism Silver, PSA 10 at its all-time peak back in the Super Bowl at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021 was a $12,000 card. That was like the peak of the market. Now, just having won the Super Bowl and the season-long MVP, that card still only got up to like 5,000. But it did go up a little bit from like where it was before the Super Bowl, like average of 4,000 to an average of 5,000. But it's not a big jump. And Kelce's cards are like, I sold a base Topps Chrome Kelce 2013 for like $35. I mean, that's really good for a raw base rookie card. So his cards are already, for the year and his position, they're really high, but he's also, probably the best tight end to ever do it.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we'll give a quick shout out to the audience here. So Franco Lanzino, great to see you. First time you are able to join live. Good Good to see the name, and welcome to the show, my man. We love having you. So if you're able to throw out any questions, we're happy to answer. And thanks again for watching and listening to the Sports Card Strategy Show, Football Card Strategy Show here. Ziggy, good to see you. Ziggy throwing out some insights that Trevor Lawrence is signing autos in Chantilly on April 2nd. He's going to go get his auto on Funko Pops. What would be a good rookie card to get his auto on while I'm there? Micah Parsons is there too. I assume Micah is Micah Parsons. That would be the Micah that I would be interested in. That's great. Oh, my shoes. Great to see you. You are a loyal audience member. We love you. Getting ready to work. Good to see Andy catching his favorite pod. And Ryan Fugger. Ryan is a loyal nooffseason.com premium member. We really appreciate that support. Andy, what's your confidence in Eric Bieniemy, as Chris Berman used to call him, Eric sleeping with Bieniemy? We hate to lose him in KC, but will he affect the values of the talented Washington Commanders skill players, invest in Howell, or wait for draft free agency? So we got a few questions in there. We'll get back to Ziggy's, but I like Ryan's because it's a perfect segue into kind of the next part of this free agency discussion. Which is, so you've got like the Derek Carrs of the world, which we're kind of saying sell. Then you've got, like, we haven't talked about Geno and, Lamar and some of the other guys. I think Daniel Jones is obviously a name to kind of throw out there. But then we have from Ryan's perspective, it's sort of like there's moves that happen in the NFL offseason during this free agency period. Some of them are coaching changes. And in fantasy, Andy, we talk a lot about this and strategizing for our fantasy leagues, because whenever there's a coaching change or a player movement, there could be collateral benefit to the performance, to the eventual performance from the move of other players not directly involved in the move. And a coaching change is always a good example of that. But so this is kind of like a long-winded question, but I think you know where I'm going. Independently of the quarterbacks, are there skill position players, to Ryan's question, Commanders or not, that you see that could potentially have a value spike in cards related to just offseason movements in general? Like, are there guys that you've got your eye on in that regard?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because I do think, based on landing spots for good quarterbacks like Derek Carr, for example, if he goes to the Saints, we're going to see an immediate spike in the expectations and the demand for the rookie cards of guys like Chris Olave. They're gonna 99% confident cut Michael Thomas. Like, he's done. He's taken up a ton of dead cap space. The Saints are currently in cap hell. Like, they have got to restructure. They've got almost $150 million they could potentially restructure. They've got to do a lot of restructuring. They've got a lot of bloated veteran contracts there. And Michael Thomas is likely to be cut. I think he's basically washed. I don't think he'll really have an impact anywhere. But I like the Eric Bieniemy move. I'm actually bullish on the Commanders' skill position players, because they're going to cut Carson Wentz. And they're going to shed that dead weight, free up some dead cap space. They've got Sam Howell. He's a 5th round pick from last year from University of North Carolina. He has some really interesting rushing upside. The guy's fearless. I think he flashed some really nice upside, and people like that. So this guy is gritty. They've got great skill. They've got so much speed there between Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel and Jahan Dotson. And these guys are young, and they could absolutely increase in expectation. Now, division is tough, man. Division is tough now with the Giants as a contender, the Eagles, Super Bowl contenders, and the Cowboys, obviously playoff contenders as well. So it's a tough division, but I think they're going to be a pretty good force to be reckoned with. I think they're definitely seeing an uptick in production and on offense this upcoming year. The same thing with the Carolina Panthers. Bringing in Frank Reich, new head coach. You probably they're gonna do something at quarterback this year, and I expect an upgrade there. So I think you could see an uptick in production for some of their wide receivers, like DJ Moore, who's just a quarterback-proof guy. So ultimately, I'm looking at some of these young, talented skill position players, mainly wide receivers, but some running backs as well. And if they've got a really good talent profile, then like the role is going to be there. So it's just a matter of, do they plug in the right quarterback? And maybe it happens through the draft, or maybe it happens through this free agency time period, then you're absolutely going to see a spike in expectations. And that's another reason why this little period, the next 2 months, you see a lot of appreciation and a lot of players' prices.
Yeah.
You know?
So I love that. And Ryan, I would say that to answer your question, Jahan Dotson is the guy that would fit my profile for buying for being interested in buying his cards. I think he fits that profile of a guy who has that first round draft pedigree, to steal Andy's term, and super talented. He flashed early on in his rookie season when he didn't really have investable cards out, or you would have had to pay through the roof for his, I think, XRCs for select or something like that. And so now you've got, Jahan has more cards out, which allows you to, which means that his most expensive cards are less expensive than they would be because he has more cards out, because people's investing are kind of spread across different cards. And so he doesn't have all of his cards out yet because there still are releases coming out for 2022. So I'd be a little bit careful with the rookies from last year, but Jahan Dotson would be a guy who would fit that profile. I like Curtis Samuel as like a fantasy sleeper, but not so much as like going out and trying to get his cards. And, but anyway, I think Andy's point about Chris Olave's pricing going up, if Derek Carr goes there, that would be interesting to me as well. Back to Ziggy's question real quick. Now I like this question a lot because, as many of you know, I'm a fan of, well, most people aren't. I'm actually a fan of the play where you go buy like a Beckett authenticated on-card auto of a guy on an investable card that was not a pack signed auto, a pre-pack auto. And then you essentially cross-grade it over into a PSA slab. The value typically goes up regardless of what the PSA card grade ends up being. As long as you have the auto grade on it, it typically is more than what you would pay for the Beckett slab. I've never gone to an autograph signing and paid per item to have the item signed. One of our audience members was going to get Tyrese Maxey's autograph in a Philadelphia area autograph signing a few weeks ago. The cost per item was $125. So he ended up basically punting on that and not doing it. So I wonder, Ziggy, what the cost is of the item, like to get an item signed. What is that cost? Independently of that, though, let's just say that it's a reasonable cost, and you're willing to have multiple items signed by Trevor. My inclination is to take a less expensive card that isn't desirable and have that signed rather than go get like a banger card or one that is already liquid. If something's already liquid, I wouldn't get it signed. If something is hard to move, like just a base Don Russ or a base optic, or even like a photo variation sort of from one of those sets that's not serial numbered or anything like that, that's where I would go, because especially for a guy like Trevor Lawrence, like even a nicely centered, highly gemmable base Don Russ, or base optic, to me, those are the cards where I can tell the kind of the expected PSA grade better than other brands. And I would, and maybe even a base Prism. I don't know. Andy, what do you think? Because what I'm saying is, like, these in-person autograph signings is an opportunity to make something valuable that's not valuable. And I would go that route rather than to touch something that's already valuable. But what do you think?
Yeah, I like that. I think ultimately I would take something that is more base. And I would take, for Trevor Lawrence specifically, I'd take a rated rookie, whether it's Donruss or Optic, and have him sign that. I think would be really cool is if you took a Optic Contenders without the auto, with like non-rookie ticket auto. You could find a nice Optic Contenders and have him sign that. I think that would be really cool. Event signed, rookie ticket auto. But Trevor Lawrence's Prism is not one. That the gem rate on that card specifically is insanely low. There's so many issues. So for reference, there's only 140 10s on Trevor Lawrence's base prism compared to 772 9s and 539 8s. So it's literally like a 10% chance of getting a PSA 10. So that's not a card I would do it on. I would do it on some type of rated rookie, probably an optic. And I think it's also important to consider the finish of the card. You probably have more smearing, just not quite as clean of an autograph on a chrome finish card versus a cardstock card. So maybe something like the base Donruss is your best bet, but I've seen like the Sharpies look really good on the base mosaic. And I don't know. I think that optic Contenders without the auto on it would be a really cool card to get signed.
Yeah, I like that a lot. You're creating your own Contenders rookie ticket auto in that case, which that's a great call. And I think, yeah, and I'm with you on the rated rookie. That's exactly what I was saying too. I would do the same thing with Micah Ziggy. I would go, because you can get those base Trevor Lawrence and Micah rated rookies they're in the dollar box. You know what I mean? I mean, and they might be in the $5 or less box, but if you buy multiples, you're going to be able to basically get them at like a dollar per rate, I would think, at a show or at a shop. And, or in a lot online. I don't know. And then, yeah, I don't know. So let's see, 125 per auto, Ziggy saying, yeah, I would agree. I think for a guy like Trevor, you're going to be paying that. I don't know much about Funko Pops, but I would agree with what you're saying, that it's going to increase the value on the Funko. Yeah, you're thinking Don. Yep. We're all kind of on the same page there. Ooh, pick out the color ink. I like that. Good call. Okay. So Oh My Shoes, mentions Gino. I wanted to kind of go, well, I want to get to Ryan. So Ryan's investing in Howell, wait for draft or free agency. So I would wait for the draft or free agency to pass, just because I'm glad Ryan asked this question. And the reason I wanted to go back to it is because I didn't want to gloss over my view on the draft and free agency, which is while in some cases there's like this temptation to buy based on what could happen, you have to realize that the odds of what you think could happen are not necessarily as great as you think they might be. And also the like when things are still in movement and rosters are not intact, you could see somebody move. You could see like Washington not have another QB through free agency, and you could think that's a good sign for Howell's cards, but then they could draft someone or they could make a trade during the draft, you know? So I think it's a little bit risky to buy into like a super sleeper before things have shaken out. But Andy, especially like, so answering Ryan's question about Howell, but Andy, do you agree or disagree with me on that?
I agree. And I think a lot of it does go back to draft capital. I mean, he's a 5th round pick. So you got to ask yourself, plus you've got a new coach coming in. There's not really that loyalty there. He wasn't involved in the pick, so he may not like the guy at all. So I think it is a very risky investment. Maybe if you're taking like a 5th of your bankroll, you know, and buying something small or something big, depending on how big your bankroll is. But I wouldn't take more than like 5%. I said a 5th. I meant to say 5% of my bankroll, and you know, in investing that in Sam Howell, because there's that is wildly optimistic to say that he'll be the starter in September right now anyways, you know?
Right. So next up is Geno Smith. So Oh My Shoes mentions Geno Smith's Topps Chrome rookie cards as a good one. He obviously has the Prism as well. I love Geno Smith now as a player, but Andy, what do you think of Geno Smith and his cards in terms of like, what is there a play there anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty cheap. I've got a rookie ticket auto Geno Smith that I think I got for like $35 or $40. I mean, I think he's a much better sound investment. Like, he's got a secure starting job. He played so good this past season. I mean, it's a large sample size the entire season. He's likely to re-sign with the Seahawks, so I don't expect a big pop from news, you know, on re-signing. I expect his increase in value to come purely from exceeding expectations in performance and like taking the Seahawks to the playoffs, which is tough, but they're not the bottom team in their division anymore. Like, they're true contenders. You know, I think Arizona is definitely the bottom team now in that division, then the Rams, and then the Seahawks, and then the 49ers. So, they're contenders. They're going to hang in there. I don't see it really going up a whole lot, but I also don't see it going down. I don't see there being, hardly any downside to that. So I think you could get some pretty cool Geno Smith. What I like is the gem rate. There's cards like the 2013 Select Hot Rookies, which has like a 95% gem rate. Literally, if you go look at the ratio of 10s to 9s and 8s on that card, it's insanely high probability of getting a 10. So I like getting something like a 2013 Select Hot Rookies, something like that of Geno Smith, and grading it because you get them so cheap, and then adding value that route. There's some nice cards from 2013 you could do that with.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the live stream, Dusty Crates. Finally made it to a live stream. Good to see you. Love the audience participation today, guys. Lamar Jackson obviously is another name being mentioned in the news right now. And what's interesting to me is, we talk about at the top of the show selling Derek Carr, and I'm looking at the data around Lamar Jackson's cards, his market overall at Market Movers. And if you want your first month for free at Market Movers, use the promo code, for $1, not free, $1. Use the promo code no off season. If you're not already a subscriber there, but his cards are up, and that's part of the football card hype cycle that we talked about. But that's also part of just his name being mentioned in the news. Like whenever someone's name is mentioned in the news, it drives interest in their eBay searches, which drives more bids, which results in higher prices. Kendall and I talk about that a lot with good news, bad news, like all sorts of stuff. So Lamar's cards are up. What do you see happening with him? And I'm looking at like some of his like parallels, and I've always been a big fan of his 2018 Kaboom. That's a card that I think like I've seen it move in pricing the exact manner that I would have expected it to move in pricing, based on like very just predictable stuff, like not stuff that like comes out of left field. And so Lamar's interesting to me as a guy that you could kind of continuously make money on. But right now I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on, is he a buy, sell, hold type of guy?
Yeah, he's wanting this massive, fully guaranteed contract, similar to what Deshaun Watson has. But Lamar was using his mom as his agent. Now he's working with the NFLPA to help negotiate his contract with the Ravens. And they're like reports are that they're up to $100 million off from what he wants, from what the team is willing to give him. He wants this massive, fully guaranteed contract. He did make improvements this past season in his passing accuracy. So that's good. He had career highs in passing accuracy when throwing balls like outside the numbers. So, he has shown improvements. He is electric in the open field in terms of his rushing ability. There's not any other quarterbacks that can rush like him. Ultimately, I think they find a way to keep him in Baltimore. I think that it's just I think that's probably going to happen. So, his rookie cards are definitely where you want to invest, but I don't necessarily see the big spike in Lamar's cards unless he actually just takes them to a deep playoff run. That's like the one thing that they're missing, or he gets back to like that 2019 form where he is just smoking every other quarterback in the league and just lighting up the scoreboard every week. He's that guy that could easily pop in the beginning of the season when he comes out week one, and throws 2 touchdowns, rushes 2 touchdowns, breaking 10 tackles. So it's like, he is electric, and I like the upside there. I've got a couple Lamar cards already, so I'm kind of in that hold category right now for him because like you said, his market's not really down at all. I mean, with the rumors, there's like these little reaches here and there. So yeah, I'm kind of on the hold side of him, and I'm not really, I wouldn't really advocate per se buying Lamar because I don't see that path for a big spike. I think it's a safe investment in terms of, you have like this long-term upside in his card just because he's so young and he's so electric. There's a lot of potential performance spikes you could see in the future.
Yeah, here's an interesting one. I'm totally with you on that. Here's sort of my process. I'm trying to stay disciplined along the lines of this process kind of across all sports, is like whenever there's a guy or, an athlete that I really want to invest in, I will take a look at, I will try to find a card like this. So like his 2018 Optic Hollow base PSA 10 has this say 2018. Yeah, 2018, his rated rookie, PSA 10 Optic Hollow has a population of 199. The last sale was $355 a couple weeks ago. We have said this is not the best time to buy football cards still because of the hype cycle coming out of the Super Bowl and into free agency, which is like huge news time. It'll go through the draft for sure. And then what I would do is I would mark this card and I would look at it in June. And I would say, okay, so now in June, we know Lamar's situation. So that's number one. Number two, it's not a time really when there's any football news happening. It's like June's basically the only football off season. And so then we've got a situation where we know more about Lamar. We've got a little bit of a cool off period before training camp starts in late July. And maybe go into early July, Andy, with like the 4th of July. I just don't know how many people are thinking about football cards. So it could be like June and into the first week of July where you see like this card go down. Maybe I would chart maybe 3 or 4 cards like this. And I would say, okay, if this card gets down to like into the 200s, especially like if I could get it for like 250 or something, now you've got like $100 profit margin from where it was in a hype cycle without Lamar really needing to do anything. Then you could probably easily sell this card again in August for around 350, right? So without him even doing anything. So does that sync with what do you believe in that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you got to go back and look at what the lowest point was in the end of October, beginning November kind of time period. That's the midseason low where the guys that aren't on the MVP track, that don't have this, pristine win-loss record, that aren't playing lights out week-to-week basis, have this incredible storyline around them. They see a lot of dips, they see a big dip. So if you go back, I'm just looking at his Optic Hollow back then, it was about a $275 card. So I think you got to plan for around that price. I think you could see that kind of dip in the June time period. July 4th, the holiday, I think that's a great time to try and snipe auctions on eBay and then be ready to sell on the preseason hype heading into September. I think that's a great formula.
I like that because then you're not relying on Lamar Jackson having a deep playoff run. That hasn't happened the last several seasons. So then hoping for that to happen. And I'm just using Lamar as an example. I think that thought process could be applied really to any player in any sport. So we talked about NFL free agency. I'm sure there's way more to talk about. So if any of you have any questions specifically on NFL free agency, card plays, you can hit us up on social media. I'm at No Offseason Card, Andy's FB Card Quest on Twitter, and Football Card Quest on Instagram. I'm Sports Card Strategy on Instagram. But the easiest thing to do if you want is just email me at paul@nooffseason.com, and I will answer your question likely on a show or in the email. And I can bring in Andy to help me answer that as well if you miss us on the show, or comment on the YouTube video, of course. Okay, so next up, NFL Draft, 2023 NFL Draft. This is a different type of hype cycle where different things happen. I don't know, Andy, if the NFL Draft hype cycle has as much of an impact on card prices as the free agency hype cycle that we're in right now. But what I'm curious about is like Bryce Young, I've pulled up on my screen, his base refractor 2021 Bowman University Chrome Auto PSA 10. That card's going for around between $250 and $300. He could be the first overall pick if these rumors about the Bears trading Justin Fields actually happen. I quite frankly don't think that that's likely at all. It looks like he's probably going to be the second overall pick, either him or CJ Stroud, to the Houston Texans. Agree, disagree on that statement? And then if you agree, is a quick flip on a Bryce Young, if he's going to be one of the darlings of the 2023 NFL draft with his Bowman U Chrome first auto, is that a play?
Yeah, I think it is. If you get it at the right price point, I definitely would be making sure to comp with the recently sold items, because I've seen some people paying some pretty decent money already for Bryce Young rookie autos, especially. So I do think he's going to be a top 3 overall pick. I think the Houston Texans are likely going to pick him. They're probably going to. I don't even know if they need to move up to number 1 with the Bears. I think the Bears have so much in Justin Fields that. I think the Houston Texans will probably get that new head coach, DeMeco Ryans, a former defensive coordinator for the 49ers, have already stated very diplomatically, of course, that they want to add depth to their quarterback room in Houston. I think it's just it's a common sense type of play for them. I think they'll definitely draft Bryce Young, which if they do, then guys like John Mechie, who's, a cancer survivor, he's going to be starting his rookie season this upcoming year, played with Bryce Young in Alabama at a high level. I expect guys like that to go up in value, who you can already invest in because he's in the 2022 product. Bryce Young becomes a play. He's definitely doesn't have as many fans as he could potentially have because of his size. So I think that a lot of people are worried that he may be a little bit too small for the NFL and like get beat up a lot. But the people that have actually journalists that have met him in person believe that he can add 20 or 30 pounds of muscle with the NFL strength training programs over the next couple of years that'll really beef him up to be able to withstand the rigors of playing an NFL quarterback. You have CJ Stroud that is going to be a top pick. You also have Will Levis, who some people compare him to Josh Allen, but he's so old coming out of college that he should be way more developed than he is. So I think he may be a little bit overrated, but I definitely think there's going to be that hype around him. Anthony Richardson from the University of Florida, I think is going to boost his draft stock a lot through the combine because he is a really good athlete. And I think he's going to test really well. He also went to a big college program, University of Florida. He's got some really good athleticism. So I think that he's going to make a wave somewhere. People are definitely going to be excited about him. You look at guys like Hinton Hooker from Tennessee. Now, if he wasn't injured, I think it would be a different story. But he's another really good athlete that threw the ball deep a ton, really well this past year in college. So he's definitely the quarterback class this year coming out. I think you're going to have at least 4 or 5 guys probably go in the first round. So it's definitely exciting. I think it's going to be really good for the you can see one of the best sellers on blowoutcards.com right now is the 2022 23 Bowman Chrome University. That's got all these guys, and apparently they're now licensed as well. So I don't know if you looked at those, but there's some nice cards. I definitely think there's guys out of there, like these quarterbacks we just talked about, like guys like Bijan Robinson from Texas. That's probably going to go in the first round. I mean, he could land with the Bills or the Eagles or maybe the Lions or something like that. I think any of those kind of landing spots, people are going to get really excited about. I think his stuff. You could look at Zach Charbonnet. I was looking at his stuff the other day with Carter. You can get Bowman Chrome autos of him for $4 or $5. And he's actually a really electric running back that's probably going to go late first, early second that I think you can make a play on. So I do see a lot of these college rookies going up in value based on their draft capital, because it's really important. You get drafted in the first round. It's a big deal this day and age.
Yeah. So Will Levis is about half the price of Stroud, and Young and Stroud are both going about around $200 to $300 for their PSA 10 base auto from 2021. But then you can go, I mean, there are obviously this CJ Stroud out of 75 yellow refractor auto on January 10th went for $214. There's a CJ Stroud that sold back in December, SGC 1010, silver refractor auto for $200. So There are recent sales, but I'm not seeing many sales in February of the big stuff. So that leads me to believe that people could be holding what they have already to sell. Which I'm glad you brought up the 2022 Bowman U release, because they are licensed. And if I am correct, we might be late in trying to flip guys like Stroud and Young and Levis, because their release has been out for almost a year. And now you see like prices kind of going up in anticipation of the NFL draft. And I would think that you have less profit margin to quick flip on those guys. But what's interesting is like when you go to the 2022 Caleb Williams cards, they are licensed and they're going for huge money, because he's obviously supposed to be the first overall pick in 2024. We haven't even had the 2023 draft, and us card strategists are already talking about the 2024 draft. But that's because you have the Bowman U Chrome first release of Caleb Williams in that set. And Andy mentioned a minute ago that the licensed autos of the other guys that we talked about are also in that set, but they're not the first auto. They don't have the first on them. So it'll be interesting to see how the first non-licensed play out against technically the non-first licensed of the 2022 set for guys like Levis, Stroud, and Young. But then you've got Caleb Williams. Some really cool stuff out of this 2022 Bowman U release. And I wonder, is that a play? Now, it's not cheap. It's not going to be cheap to get Caleb, but is that going to be a play to where, you buying in on him, maybe not now because the release just came out, but following the strategy of, do you try to target a guy like Caleb Williams in June, July of this year, or even November, December? It depends, right? Because we're talking about college football in the overall football card hype cycle. But just interesting stuff to think about, throw out there, talk about related to the NFL draft. Andy,
and I think
your thoughts on this?
And I think the common denominator you want to look for is like a rookie autograph, because people look at even a college uniform. If it's autographed, then all of a sudden you've got one of the first, professional autographs of this player. I mean, a guy like Caleb Williams, big college program at USC, 4-star recruit, 91st percentile scouting grade. I mean, you're talking about a really good prospect here. And if you have like a guy that's going to go as a top 5 pick and you can get his rookie autograph, whether it's college uniform license or not, if it's from like a reputable company, even if it's like one of those Onyx cards, like we've looked at Shedeur Sanders before, yep. That kind of card's going to hold value, and you could potentially see that card go up exponentially if there's very few cards available for this player, and he could lead the team to a national championship. And like Carter and I were looking at card prices of college athletes heading into the bowl games. I mean, there's people that pay serious money for the quarterbacks on some of these big college programs.
Yeah. And so you mentioned a guy like Hendon Hooker. Where could he be drafted? Cause I'm looking at his now. This is Bowman Chrome U first, licensed in the in the Tennessee uniform, looking, it's very solid looking card here, and it's much more affordable than your other top quarterbacks that you mentioned. So where could he be drafted? And since you mentioned him, like is he a guy that could have a good pro career in your opinion?
I think he can. There's going to be obviously a learning curve there, but I don't think he's going to actually go in the first round. I think his stock has fallen quite a bit, and I think he may slide to like the second or third. But he's a guy that could emerge in the NFL as somebody that like makes a big splash, like makes a big wave when he does get his starting opportunity. So. I think he could go in the second or third round to a variety of teams, as as just like a stash, to see how he develops and recovers and everything. So, yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking. I mean, he's not in the first round projections right now.
Do you remember when you mentioned Shedeur Sanders? Do you remember when you and Kendall and I a year ago were talking about buying his auto, this blue auto in the Onyx set for like $15-20?
Mm-hmm.
Now these
Yeah, I
aren't
do.
sales, but these are listed 350 or best offer, 130 or best offer. I'm gonna look up some Shedeur Sanders. Okay, so Green Ink out of 50 just sold for 85. People are getting them graded. That's great. So like the reason why we talk about this, everyone, is because like we want to be like a year ahead on this stuff at least, because like this is how it all plays out. So like Blue Ink, Shedeur Sanders, like Kendall bought this card after we filmed that episode, the three of us. Kendall went out and bought this card for like $20. It just sold for 95. So safe to say the three of us were right about that call in that discussion we had. The blue auto, he signed 400 of them. Green, he signed 50. Going back to here's auto 5 out of 5, 129. That would be the one that I would, if you're going to pay 95 for the out of 400, why not pay 130 for the out of 5 black? That's pretty sick. Anyway,
yeah, I mean, he transcended markets. So you think about it, like I wasn't even following Deion Sanders' reality show they made around it. I mean, but that was getting pumped up through the algorithm on the front page of my social media feeds, on Twitter, on YouTube. And it's like, even if you didn't follow college football, you got to know who Shedeur Sanders was because of Deion Sanders and everything that he did for Jackson State. So, I mean, it's been a big story. And I think just that alone added to a lot of the hype and the value increase. Like, so immediately people are going to like, dude, I want to get this. This is Deion Sanders' kid. Like, I got to get his rookie autos. And there's just so few of them. Like you see, they just exponentially go up in value, regardless if they're licensed or not.
Yeah. So the other one that I wanted to talk to you about today, before we wrap the show, I want to wrap the show with like, okay, who are like your top buys? Because we talked about NFL free agency, we talked about NFL draft. Now we're talking about 2024 NFL draft. And then I want to circle back around to like, okay, but what are you actually doing? But before we do that, another father-son combo that has me intrigued for a couple reasons is I just love Marvin Harrison Jr. and I don't love Ohio State, but I do love Marvin Harrison Jr. And I had his father on several of my fantasy teams in the early 2000s. And he was a great guy to have on a fantasy team, if you remember Marvin Harrison for the Colts. And so we get a lot of questions about like retired players. And we just talked about Deion and Shedeur. Now we've got Marvin Jr. and Marvin Sr. I don't know if Primetime's cards actually went up as a result or are going up as a result of Shedeur, but I would venture to guess that when Shedeur gets drafted, you're going to see Prime a lot. We already see Prime a lot, but we're going to probably see him even more. And Prime could be a play, like his cards could be a play, buying them now, and then selling them when Shedeur gets drafted. And I wonder if the same could happen with Marvin Harrison Sr. Not because he's the opposite of Prime from a personality standpoint. Like he's probably not going to be all in front of when Marvin Harrison Jr. gets drafted, but Marvin Harrison Jr. could go in the top 5 of the 2024 NFL draft. And does that bring up Marvin Harrison Sr.'s cards? Because Jr. doesn't have any yet. So I'm really, really stretching here, and I'm trying to get to like retired players in this show. And this is kind of a way of doing it, because I think with retired players, you have to look at like what is going to move their value potentially. And so right now we haven't seen much from Marvin Harrison Sr. He kind of retired quietly amid some speculation of like him being involved in like a shooting back in the day, which I don't think he was directly involved with, but he's a Hall of Famer, had an amazing career, and is basically gone silent. But now you have his son, who's like a top prospect. Does this do anything for Marvin Harrison Sr.'s cards, Andy?
Maybe a little. Maybe there's a few people out there that are tying that connection together, and it's driving them to buy some more Marvin Harrison Senior rookie cards. I think it's very nostalgic. You're going to have a market for Marvin Harrison Senior, just like you're always going to have a market for Deion Sanders. There's very few people that I know, like in our generation, that don't want to have a Deion Sanders rookie card. I mean, it's an iconic draft class, and there's only a few variations. And I mean, can you imagine if you got one like hard signed, like event signed autograph? Because this didn't do really rookie autos back then. So, I think there's always going to be a market for these guys. I don't know that the media relevancy is really going to spike him a whole lot, especially with Marvin Harrison, only because he's just not going to make the waves in the media like that, like Prime is, So there's always going to be a much bigger market for Prime in that sense, but at the same time, I see some people drawing the connection, and then there's always a market there. It's probably you could get something really nice. I think ultimately it's like not really investment. It's more, does this have a lot of collection value to you? Were you a big Colts fan, back in the early 2000s kind of thing? And it's probably not going to lose value, but it's probably not going to go up a whole lot either.
Yeah, that's probably a good call. He's got a 1996 Select back when Pinnacle made Select. Panini didn't even own the Select brand at that point in time. He's got a 1996 Topps Chrome. You can get these cards pretty cheap in PSA 10. This is a 1996 SP. So recognizable brands there, but way back in the day. I mean, 1996 rookie. So this is really, for many that are consuming this content, this is actually a really old card. And then for others, we kind of span generations here. For others, it's recognizable, like it's nostalgic, like you said. So
and that's like almost the peak of the junk wax era too. So I'm sure the print run on his some of his rookie cards are just insane, like even compared to today's numbers.
I did see this Reggie White PMG come up for auction on PWCC, and it was today in the Slab Stocks daily slab email. So I thought, all right, Football Card Strategy Show with Andy. Let's pull this up. What are your thoughts on, like, I mean, this is interesting. Like, I think the reason why this is such a high bid right now is because it's a red PMG. So it's super rare. And it is in a pretty high grade, like from 1997, it's a BGS 9. So 9.5 centering, 9.5 or 8.5 surface, 9 corners and edges. But Reggie White, all-time defensive player. What's your take on, like, retired players in general and even retired defensive players? Like, this is like a perfect storm here, right?
Oh yeah, man. It's all about the super rare inserts. PMGs have become extremely popular. They're like equivalent of the kabooms today, it's such a popular, iconic card now in our hobby. So all the Hall of Fame players, like I've tried several times to get my hands on a Mike Allstott PMG. They just get so expensive. I haven't been able to get one yet. And but you can sometimes find a Metal Universe hobby boxes on eBay for a decent price. Like I remember one of the guys in our community posted up in Discord. There's a guy selling multiple hobby boxes of Metal Universe from 96 or 97, the PMG year. And like he was selling them for like 100 or 150 a piece. And you had a chance of pulling a PMG out of there. So I kind of like that route. It sounds like a lot of fun. But yeah, man, those cards are really expensive, but I don't think they're going to lose value. I mean, that's a card like everybody wants to collect PMGs. They want to put together a PMG rainbow. They want to be a PMG super collector. I mean, it's super, super popular, ultra rare insert.
Yeah, not something we talk about too often on the Sports Card Strategy. So I'm glad we got to get that in. All right. Yeah. TW saying in the comments, top guest to have is Andy. That's true, but technically he's not a guest. He is actually a co-host here for nooffseason.com and the Football Card Strategy Show. But yes, he's an amazing guest, amazing co-host. Great person to collaborate with, great person to know. I'm very fortunate to be able to have him as part of the team. So, all right. So Andy, let's wrap today with like, who are like your top buys and then who are like your top sleepers along with that. Like free agency was a was a category we had to go into. Draft was a category we had to go into. But who overall are your guys right now?
Well, I would say my top quarterback buy, and there's a lot of personal collections, so it's like it's highly debatable. It's a very speculative play. It's a gamble, but there's a lot of personal collection value to me. I'm buying Kyle Trask right now. I think that just based on news alone, there was a press conference with Arians yesterday that Trask is going to be the starter. He went on Rich Eisen's show and said this, and so I think there's a high likelihood with how much dead cap we're fighting this offseason with Trask on a rookie contract. I think there's a high likelihood that they give Trask the starting nod in September, unless they get just like a free handout from free agency, which is unlikely. And so I'm buying him. I think there's still a lot of upward growth. I've comped him out and compared him to guys like Zach Wilson, Davis Mills, like kind of like that bottom tier of the 2021 quarterback class. And you can get a lot of really nice cards for super cheap. And I just think, like, if it didn't have a lot of personal collection value to me as just an investor, I'd sell them on the news this offseason, heading into September. I wouldn't even wait to see if he actually plays good. I think that's very speculative, very much a risk. So there's a lot of potential. So he's one of my top buys. And then I am definitely investing in John Mechie on the Houston Texans. I think it's like almost 100% certainty that they'd spend their first round draft pick, early first round, on whether it's Bryce Young or Will Levis. People are going to get hyped up for a new quarterback, and I'm hoping it's Bryce Young because I think that would have the biggest impact on John Mechie. But you could also look at Nico Collins. So I like the skill position weapons there. I also am really, really bullish on the skill position weapons in Detroit, namely Jameson Williams, who is a first-round pick from Alabama, and the guy's absolutely electric speed. He was recovering from a torn ACL almost his entire rookie season, but you can still get very favorable prices on his rookie autos right now. And I think the Lions are an ascending team in the NFL, and I think they're set up for a massive 2023. I think they're going to boost up the defense this offseason, and boom. I mean, they're serious contenders in 2023. Very bullish on the Lions skill position weapons, namely guys like Jameson Williams. I'm not sure you can find deals on Amon-Ra St. Brown, but definitely look at like buying him too. I mean, he's a stud. So, and they could potentially upgrade at running back in the draft. So very, very interesting. Very bullish on those guys, and I think there's a play to be made on DeAndre Hopkins. I think if he stays in Arizona, it'd be bad, but he wants out. Kyler's doing Kyler things, being super dramatic and already complaining about the new coach. Hopkins has still got a lot of juice. And if he goes to a new team with a much better quarterback, or just a good quarterback in general, that has a lot higher probability of making the playoffs and stuff like that, because Hopkins is already a fringe Hall of Famer, that he could absolutely spike just based on news. So I really like buying DeAndre Hopkins. He already has a big market and collection base. So if I'm buying DeAndre Hopkins, like I really don't have much downside. It's really not going to go down. And I have a lot of upside with it being able to potentially go up with a new team. And then I would say like a decent gamble is Jordan Love, as I think if the Packers keep Rodgers and Rodgers wants to stay in Green Bay, then Jordan Love could be traded. I mean, he's heading into the final year of his rookie contract. They could get the most for him based on the limited film sample size we have of him. I think that he's a decent gamble. I mean, I think the same thing could be said for Tua. I mean, Tua, it's really hard to predict injuries. And the only thing that is holding Tua's market down right now is the fact that he had those 2 concussions and he ended the season on a sour note, but he's been 100% cleared by medical staff. And yeah, sure, he's got a higher fragility rating. So fragility is something you definitely have to take into consideration when buying these players. But at the same time, I think it's really a good play to spend like 5% of your bankroll on you can get a nice Tua card right now for so cheap. And man, they are serious contenders next year. Tough division, crazy tough division, the AFC East. But I don't know. I see a little regression from the Bills. And I see Miami being serious contenders in that division. You got also the Patriots are also there, and they bring in Bill O'Brien. So there's an uptick there, potential for Mac Jones and the Patriots offense, especially if they draft a wide receiver this offseason or bring in an elite wide receiver. What if DeAndre Hopkins goes to New England? I mean, that would be massive for Mac Jones. And there's still people buying Bailey Zappi, but Mac Jones is a secure starter there. And now they bring in Bill O'Brien. He's got a lot of experience in calling an offense and stuff. And so now there should be a much higher expectations, like just hype leading into the season. So I think that's a play with upside. Just comparing him, he's down there with the Trey Lance, who's recovering. He's down there with the Kyle Trask. He's like in that type of range. Like Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence are just miles ahead of those guys in terms of value.
Yeah, love all of that. I'm going to comment on several things because I love all of it so much. Number one, John Mechie was on my injured reserve in my dynasty league last year because I saw this potential progression happening. So I'm ready to activate him off of IR. Got him for nothing. I won the fantasy football league that we were in this year. So I did want to comment on that real quick that we haven't. Unfortunately, the DeMar Hamlin situation kind of derailed everything at the end of everyone's fantasy league. Obviously, that's more important than fantasy football, but at the same time, there's not much that's that much more important than fantasy football. So winning that league, having John Mechie in my other league, Jameson Williams is the next thing. I literally had him on my notes for the episode. So you sniped him in typical Andy sniper fashion, sniped Jameson Williams away from me. I was going to mention him. So we are aligned with that call. And then Tua is a great call because I just see it playing out where he doesn't have injury issues in 2023. It happens all the time in sports where people are, high profile athletes get injured all the time, but then that doesn't mean that they're just going to continuously get injured. Now, some of them do, but many more of them do not have these problems. And so, unfortunately, like selfishly, we are not concerned with Tua's long-term health in the sports card market. We're basically only concerned with the fact can we buy him low right now? And then can he stay healthy enough later to get the hype spike and sell him? And I think Tua fits that profile perfectly. Now, this could be some hyperbole on my part, but when you look at the Jalen Hurts Tua storyline, it goes back a ways, right? And if you're Tua, you got to be sitting there thinking, okay, I beat this guy out and now he's in the Super Bowl. And one of the reasons why I'm not in the Super Bowl is because I was injured. And does that play into at any level these guys being competitive professional athletes? I think so. And I think we could see a Tua storyline in 2023 where Hurts made the run in 2022. Does Tua do it in 2023? If that does play out, that would be huge for his cards, considering you can buy him lower now than those other guys. Kyle Trask is another one. I was buying Kyle Trask a couple years ago. I was a little bit early. I sold and got out of my Kyle Trask just because I wanted to get that money back. I got the money back. Now I don't own any Kyle Trask. That's interesting that you're buying him now. I think that's a good call. Sometimes I'm just way too early on these things and I don't stay in it long enough to actually get the profit. Kyle Trask might be one of those guys for me. And I might be buying into Trevor Lawrence at the high point, but I'm a believer enough in him to where I'm still looking at, can I get cards like this one for less than $500? And I just did. Literally this one I just got for, I believe, less than $450. It's the Black Prism auto out of Chronicles. So I don't know what it would grade. It probably would not get a 10, but it should arrive in a couple days. So I'm excited to see like what the condition looks like. It's authenticated by eBay. So I still am. The guys that I'm buying are Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow. And that's pretty much my short list. And that's my strategy right now because I don't know that I can buy them low. I don't know if that exists for those guys, right? But what I do know is that like Joe Burrow's stuff should be lower in June than it's been in a while. And same with Trevor Lawrence. And Joe Burrow stuff dipped in September last year, if you recall. So Joe Burrow got off to a slow start with the Cincinnati Bengals. And so I'm not saying I'm buying Joe Burrow right now, or I'm buying a bunch of Trevor Lawrence right now, but those are the guys on my short list that I do believe could have the hype spikes that it takes in the postseason to really drive the value. So I'd say the risk I'm taking is trying to buy those guys at the right time, the right card at the right time, because I know their floor is so high. Like there's almost no risk with those guys. So we'll see. The one name at the end of the show that I want to throw out here to you that we have not talked about yet is Isaiah Pacheco from the Chiefs. How do you feel about him? Because I've got him on some fantasy teams, and when I watch him play and when I watched him in the Super Bowl, he stood out to me as a guy that not everybody knows yet and could be a guy at a skill position that could yield some returns in the future. What do you think of Isaiah Pacheco?
Well, he's such a late round draft pick from the NFL draft. Like I think he was drafted in the 6th or 7th round. So he's got very few rookie cards. So the ones that are out, like the Elite and the XR, they're really expensive. So I'm not on the buying end. I would, because as Carter says, he runs like a kid just stole his lunch money. Like, and that's how he runs every single play. He just runs so hard. He doesn't quite have the vision that some of the elite running backs have, but I think that can be developed with experience and training. So he's got a lot of potential, especially in that high octane offense. And he runs extremely explosively. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to obviously wait to buy Isaiah Pacheco until like more stuff comes out, maybe November of this year. Maybe he doesn't get off to a super hot start and there's way more product out for him. So now I can kind of buy in at a better price. I think that would be the play there for me. I love the Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, Joe Burrow's the top 5, like bona fide top 5 QB in the NFL now. But Trevor Lawrence, I think, is going to run the AFC South for the next 4 or 5 years. I think there's a massive window here for the Jaguars, and they're probably going to be in the playoffs for the next 4 or 5 years. I think that's a very smart, like I'm very bullish on that play because I think he's ascending right now for sure. And they get Calvin Ridley this year. I don't know how rusty he's going to be, but that's another weapon. That's a really good offensive weapon. And so I'm really bullish on Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne, who developed into a bell cow role, who's incredibly explosive. Last year was basically his rookie year. So, really, I mean, both these guys are like, you could look at Trevor Lawrence as being a rookie this past year. And so I really like what I saw because now he finally got a real, head coach and everything. So I think they're ascending. And the Jags, I mean, you just look at it. Titans are probably going to trade Derrick Henry. They're going to cut or release Ryan Tannehill. They're entering a full rebuild mode. The Colts are probably going to try and move up in the draft to draft a quarterback. They're probably going to overspend on a guy like Will Levis or maybe CJ Stroud. And we'll see. I think you could definitely invest in like Michael Pittman and probably Jonathan Taylor just because he had such a bad season. But then you look at the Texans and like, there's still gonna be a rough 2023, for them either way. So I'm looking at the Jags, like they're in the catbird seat to run the AFC South for the next few years.
Yeah, Trevor stepped up to me and became a guy that was a prospect and is now like he is what everybody thought he could be already, and exciting to see what he can do. Joe Burrow, same thing. Like I was not sold on Joe Burrow even in his Super Bowl run. I thought that could be a little bit of a flash in the pan. It was not. He impressed me in 2023 to the point where I was able to do in 2022, where I was able to do my evaluation and say, okay, like you're talking about with Trevor, it's like now we're in the position with Trevor as sports card investors because all of his stuff has already come out and Burrow's stuff has been out for a while. Now we can say, okay, these guys are still super young. We think they can win. The pricing has like kind of plateaued off on them for the release reasons and the initial rookie hype cycle reasons. But I think we see the second wave with guys like Burrow and Lawrence where it's going to be hard to like the same thing with Pacheco. Like you can't buy him yet because it's just prices are too high for all the reasons that you stated. But once the releases are done coming out, once there's not as much, initial hype around him as a rookie, he could be a skill position player that kind of rises again. I like that you threw out Jonathan Taylor as well, just because logic there is why couldn't he come back? Like if Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley can come back from injury and do what they did, like Jonathan Taylor should be able to do it. So why not, maybe try to put some money there on some of his big stuff. All right, Andy, anything else you want to add before we sign off for Football Card Strategy Show episode 10?
Hey man, I could keep going for a couple more hours. I think we could keep going. There's just so many interesting storylines to follow. So hey, make sure you guys are subscribed to the Sports Card Strategy Show and check out Football Card Quest if you want more football card content every week. And we're gonna keep grinding.
Yeah, we took a little bit of a Football Card Strategy Show hiatus, but Andy and I are going to get more scheduled. So you'll be seeing more of Andy and I talking football cards together. And if there's any questions or any guests that you all want to try to have us bring onto the Football Card Strategy Show, let us know. Let us know in the comments. Email me at paul@nooffseason.com, and definitely check out all of what Andy's doing at Football Card Quest. He's the man. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for watching and listening to the Football Card Strategy Show, part of the nooffseason.com Sports Card Content Network. Have a great day.